The afternoon air in Portland carried an uneasy stillness, the kind that settles over a city when tension has already been simmering for days. Streets that usually hum with routine traffic and everyday noise felt watchful, restrained, as if the city itself was holding its breath. At approximately 2:18 p.m. Pacific time, that fragile calm fractured. A call came into emergency dispatch reporting a shooting in southeast Portland. Within minutes, the situation escalated into a federal-level incident, one that would ripple through a community already strained by national unrest. Portland police officers were the first to respond to the report, arriving in the 100-200 block of Southeast Main Street. What they encountered immediately shifted the gravity of the situation. This was not a typical local shooting scene. Officers confirmed that federal agents had been involved, triggering a different chain of authority, investigation, and public concern. In moments like these, the distinction matters, not only legally but emotionally. When federal force intersects with civilian injury, the implications reach far beyond the immediate scene. As officers worked to secure the area, additional information began to surface, complicating the picture further. Just 6 minutes later, at 2:24 p.m., police were dispatched to a second location, near Northeast 146th Avenue in East Burnside. There, a man and a woman were found suffering from gunshot wounds. Both were quickly transported to a nearby hospital. Their conditions were not immediately disclosed, leaving families, neighbors, and the wider public suspended in uncertainty. 2 locations, 2 injured civilians, federal agents involved, and at that moment, very few confirmed answers. The Portland Police Bureau released a brief but carefully worded statement acknowledging the shooting and confirming the involvement of federal personnel. The lack of detail was notable, but not unusual. In incidents involving federal agencies, information often emerges slowly, filtered through multiple layers of review and jurisdiction. What was clear, however, was that this was no isolated street-level confrontation. It was an incident that would be examined under national scrutiny. Soon after, the FBI's Portland field office confirmed that the shooting involved Customs and Border Protection agents, and that the FBI would be leading the investigation. That announcement alone carried weight. It signaled that the event crossed into a category requiring federal oversight, internal review, and heightened accountability. The presence of Customs and Border Protection, an agency typically associated with borders and ports of entry, raised immediate questions in the public mind, even as officials urged patience. At this stage, authorities emphasized caution. The timeline was still being established. The reason for the reported discrepancy between the 2 locations had not yet been clarified. Investigators had not publicly explained how the initial call on Southeast Main Street connected to the later discovery of the victims miles away. In incidents like this, early assumptions can distort reality, and officials were careful not to speculate. Standing before the press, Portland Police Chief Bob Day addressed the city with measured words. He acknowledged the emotional undercurrent running through the community, particularly in light of recent national events. "We are still in the early stages of this incident," he said, adding a direct appeal for calm. His statement reflected an awareness that timing matters, that this shooting did not occur in a vacuum. Across the country, communities were already grappling with heightened emotions following a deadly police shooting in Minneapolis. That broader context amplified every development in Portland. Even without complete information, the involvement of federal agents carried symbolic weight, intersecting with ongoing debates about law enforcement authority, accountability, and public trust. Behind the scenes, coordination was already underway. The Portland Police Bureau maintained its role in securing scenes and assisting emergency response, while deferring investigative leadership to federal authorities. The Department of Homeland Security, which oversees Customs and Border Protection, was contacted for additional information. As of that moment, no detailed response had been released. For residents near both reported locations, the day unfolded in fragments: sirens, police tape, unanswered questions. For the broader public, updates came in cautious increments, each statement carefully constructed to convey facts without drawing conclusions. In the digital age, where speculation travels faster than verification, this restraint was deliberate. The uncertainty surrounding the victims' conditions only deepened the sense of unease. Hospitalization confirmed the seriousness of the injuries, but without official updates, the human impact remained abstract. Two people reduced to headlines, their stories temporarily overshadowed by procedure and protocol. Yet for those close to them, this was already deeply personal. As investigators began reconstructing the sequence of events, attention turned to process. Federal use of force incidents typically trigger internal reviews alongside criminal investigations. Body-worn cameras, radio logs, dispatch recordings, and witness statements would all become critical pieces. But none of that would happen instantly. Transparency, officials indicated, would follow verification. Chief Day's call for calm was not merely procedural, it was preventative. History has shown how quickly incomplete information can inflame tensions, especially when trust is fragile. His message underscored the responsibility of both authorities and the public during moments of uncertainty to allow facts to emerge before judgment hardens into narrative. By early evening, the known facts remained limited but significant. 2 civilians hospitalized, federal agents involved, FBI leading the investigation, Department of Homeland Security contacted, and a city watching closely, aware that what happens next, what is confirmed, clarified, or corrected, will shape public response as much as the incident itself. This was the opening chapter of a story still unfolding, a moment when questions outnumbered answers and when restraint, by officials, media, and the public, was as consequential as action. The investigation had only begun, and with it, a careful process aimed at establishing what happened, how it happened, and why. As night approached in Portland, the focus shifted from the immediate shock to the slow, methodical work of accountability. And in that transition, from sirens to statements, from urgency to inquiry, the nation's attention began to narrow on what federal investigators would uncover next. When the immediate chaos subsides, what follows is not silence but scrutiny. In Portland, as flashing lights faded from the streets and police tape marked the perimeter of unanswered questions, the incident entered a far more consequential phase, a federal investigation. This is the moment where narratives pause and procedures take over, where every movement, command, and decision is examined not through emotion, but through documentation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation assuming control was not symbolic. It was procedural and deliberate. When federal agents discharge weapons resulting in civilian injuries, the investigative framework changes entirely. Jurisdiction consolidates, evidence handling tightens, communication narrows, and every detail becomes subject to review at multiple levels of authority. At the center of this process is use of force assessment, a complex, rule-bound examination designed to answer one core question: were the actions taken lawful under federal standards? This assessment does not begin with conclusions. It begins with reconstruction. Investigators first establish a precise timeline. Dispatch records, radio transmissions, and digital logs are synchronized to the second. The initial call at 2:18 p.m. in southeast Portland is placed alongside the later response at 2:24 p.m. near northeast 146th Avenue in East Burnside. The discrepancy between locations is not treated as a contradiction, but as a data point, one that must be explained through movement, pursuit, or unfolding events. Next comes the physical evidence. Ballistics analysis determines how many shots were fired, from what distance, and from which weapons. Shell casings, impact points, and trajectory angles are mapped with forensic precision. These details matter because federal use of force policies are exacting. The justification for each discharge is evaluated independently, not collectively. Equally critical is video evidence. Body-worn cameras, vehicle dash cameras, and nearby surveillance footage are collected and secured. Investigators do not rely on a single angle. They search for continuity, how events appear from multiple perspectives, whether actions align with verbal commands, and how rapidly circumstances evolved. In federal cases, video does not replace testimony, it contextualizes it. Customs and Border Protection agents, like all federal officers, operate under defined engagement protocols. These protocols outline when force may be used, how threats are assessed, and what de-escalation steps are required when feasible. The investigation will examine whether those standards were followed, not in hindsight, but in the moment as it unfolded. At the same time, witness accounts are gathered. This includes statements from involved agents, local officers, civilians in the area, and medical personnel who treated the injured. Each statement is documented separately, then cross-referenced. Inconsistencies are not immediately interpreted as falsehoods. They are evaluated as natural byproducts of stress and perspective. Public communication during this phase is intentionally restrained. Authorities release only confirmed facts, avoiding speculation. This is not secrecy for its own sake. It is protection of the investigative process. Premature conclusions can compromise witness cooperation, distort evidence interpretation, and erode the legitimacy of eventual findings. Portland Police Chief Bob Day's earlier appeal for calm reflects this reality. In moments where federal authority intersects with local communities, emotional response can outpace factual clarity. Law enforcement leadership understands that once public trust is strained, it is difficult to restore. His statement acknowledged the broader national context without allowing it to dictate local conclusions. That national context remains impossible to ignore. The shooting occurred amid heightened sensitivity following a deadly incident in Minneapolis. Across the country, communities are alert to patterns, not just events. Federal agencies are acutely aware of this environment. Every step of the investigation carries implications not only for Portland, but for public perception of federal law enforcement nationwide. The involvement of the Department of Homeland Security adds another layer. While the FBI leads the investigation, DH's oversight ensures internal accountability mechanisms are activated. This includes administrative reviews that run parallel to criminal inquiries. Even if no criminal wrongdoing is found, policy compliance is assessed separately. Meanwhile, the condition of the injured individuals remains a focal point of concern. Hospitals are bound by privacy laws, limiting the release of medical information. Yet the seriousness of their injuries influences both investigative urgency and public reaction. 2 people hospitalized is not an abstract statistic. It is a human outcome that frames the entire inquiry. For the families of those injured, the process can feel distant and procedural. Federal investigations move deliberately, not emotionally. Timelines are measured in weeks, sometimes months. Findings are released only when substantiated. This pace often clashes with public demand for immediate answers, creating tension between transparency and thoroughness. Media coverage reflects this balance. Responsible reporting emphasizes what is known, what is not, and what steps are underway. The absence of detail is not evidence of concealment, it is evidence of process. In federal cases, credibility hinges on restraint. As days pass, the investigation will progress through defined stages: evidence analysis, legal review, internal policy assessment, and eventual public reporting. Each stage builds upon the last. No single element determines the outcome. It is the convergence of facts, policy, and law that will shape conclusions. For Portland, this incident has already altered the civic atmosphere. Even without protests or unrest, awareness has shifted. Residents understand that the presence of federal agents carries different implications than local policing. The questions now being asked about authority, accountability, and oversight will persist long after the investigation concludes. This is the weight of federal scrutiny. It does not move quickly, but it moves comprehensively. It is designed not to satisfy immediate emotion, but to withstand long-term examination. Whether the findings ultimately justify the actions taken or raise further concerns, their credibility will rest on the rigor of this process. As investigators continue their work behind closed doors, the public remains in a holding pattern, alert, cautious, and waiting. The facts will emerge incrementally, not dramatically. And when they do, they will not only explain what happened on a Portland afternoon, but also contribute to a broader national conversation about federal force and civilian safety. The camera does not rush forward, it slows, it lingers. Because by now, the story is no longer just about 2 people shot on a quiet street. It is about what happens after the gunfire fades, when a city wakes up and realizes something has changed. In Portland, Oregon, the hours following the shooting unfold in a haze of unanswered questions. Streets reopen. Sirens disappear, but the silence feels heavier than the chaos that came before. 2 civilians remain hospitalized, federal agents remain unnamed, and an entire city is left trying to understand what exactly occurred and why. Officials confirm only what they must. Federal agents were involved. Customs and Border Protection personnel were present. The FBI has assumed control of the investigation. Beyond that, details are scarce. No body camera footage is released. No timeline is officially clarified. Even the question of location remains blurred, with reports pointing to two different areas miles apart. This lack of clarity is not accidental. In moments like these, information becomes controlled terrain. The Portland Police Bureau emphasizes that this is an active, evolving situation. Statements are carefully worded. Language is restrained. Early stages, they repeat. But outside official briefings, uncertainty spreads faster than facts. Residents ask what prompted federal agents to use lethal force. Was there an immediate threat? Was this a targeted operation? Or did a routine encounter spiral into violence? These questions grow louder because of timing. The shooting does not exist in isolation. It happens against the backdrop of national unrest, an atmosphere already charged by recent events elsewhere in the country. Tensions are high. Trust is fragile. Every action by law enforcement is scrutinized through a lens shaped by history, fear, and lived experience. Portland knows this dynamic well. For years, the city has been a focal point in national debates over policing, federal intervention, and the balance between security and civil liberties. Protests, counter-protests, federal deployments, court battles. Portland has seen how quickly a local incident can transform into a national symbol. And now, once again, federal presence becomes the center of gravity. The FBI's confirmation that Customs and Border Protection agents were involved raises immediate concerns. CBP is traditionally associated with border enforcement, not urban patrols. Their presence inside a major American city, far from any border, triggers a familiar unease. Why were they there? Under whose authority? And what operational mandate were they executing? Federal officials say the investigation will determine the facts, but for the public, the optics already matter. Two people, a man and a woman, were shot. They were transported to the hospital. Their conditions are not immediately disclosed. Their names are withheld. In the absence of details, speculation fills the vacuum. Social media accelerates the spread of partial narratives. Videos circulate without context. Eyewitness accounts contradict one another. This is how modern crises evolve, not in real time but in fragments. Portland Police Chief Bob Day steps forward, acknowledging what many feel, but few in authority often say aloud. He recognizes the heightened emotions gripping the community. He references national trauma. He calls for calm. His message is measured, almost pleading, not defensive, not dismissive. A request for patience in a moment when patience is in short supply. Yet calm is difficult when federal force enters local space. The investigation itself becomes a story. The FBI leading the inquiry suggests seriousness, but also distance. Federal agencies investigating federal agents can inspire confidence or deepen skepticism, depending on who is watching. For some, it signals accountability. For others, it feels like institutions closing ranks. No conclusions are announced. No justification is offered. The process, not the outcome, dominates the narrative. Meanwhile, city leaders remain cautious. The Portland Police Bureau stresses that officers responded only after the shooting occurred. Their role, they say, was not enforcement, but response. This distinction is important. It signals boundaries between local and federal authority, lines that many fear have been blurred in recent years. And outside the city, the country is watching. National media outlets frame the incident as another test of America's internal stability. Federal law enforcement, public trust, use of force, all converge in one event. The question is no longer only what happened on Southeast Main Street or near Northeast 146th Avenue. The question is what this moment represents. Is this an isolated incident, or another symptom of a deeper fracture? As night falls again over Portland, the streets remain calm, but alert. People talk quietly. Phones buzz with updates that say little. There are no immediate protests, no official declarations, just waiting. Waiting for facts, waiting for accountability, waiting to see if this moment fades or ignites something larger. And as the investigation continues behind closed doors, one truth becomes unavoidable in today's America. The actions of federal agents in a single city can ripple far beyond its borders. The story is no longer just about two people shot. It is about power, presence, and the fragile contract between the state and the public. As dawn breaks once again over Portland, The city enters a phase that is often the most difficult to endure, not the shock of violence, but the long wait for answers. The streets look ordinary, traffic moves, businesses open, yet beneath the surface the sense of unease remains, quiet but persistent. The federal shooting has now transitioned from an emergency response into a formal investigation. The FBI confirms it is leading the inquiry involving Customs and Border Protection agents. This shift is procedural, expected under federal guidelines. But for the public, the process feels distant, slow, and opaque. Investigations do not move at the speed of public emotion. Officials emphasize method over momentum. Evidence must be reviewed, timelines reconstructed, witness accounts verified, ballistics examined. Every step is documented. Every conclusion must withstand legal scrutiny. This deliberate pace is designed to protect integrity, but it also tests patience. And patience is a fragile resource. City leaders continue to urge calm, reinforcing that Portland police officers were not the ones who fired the shots. Their role, they say, was limited to responding after the incident. This distinction remains central. It reinforces the separation between local policing and federal enforcement, a line that many believe must remain clear to preserve community trust. Yet clarity remains elusive. The public still does not know why federal agents were present in the area or what precipitated the shooting. Officials refrain from speculation. No motive is announced. No justification is offered. Silence becomes policy, and policy becomes perception. For many residents, that silence feels heavy. Civil liberties advocates begin to ask familiar questions. What standards govern federal use of force in domestic operations? How is accountability enforced when federal agencies operate within city limits? What oversight mechanisms exist? And how transparent are they? These are not new debates, but each incident renews them. The involvement of Customs and Border Protection draws particular attention. CBP is traditionally associated with border security, not civilian neighborhoods. Its presence far from the border highlights the expanding footprint of federal enforcement across the country. A reality shaped by evolving security strategies, interagency cooperation, and national priorities. Supporters argue such deployments are lawful and necessary. Critics warn they blur jurisdictional boundaries and erode public trust. Portland, once again, finds itself at the center of this national tension. Meanwhile, the two individuals who were shot remain hospitalized. Their conditions are not publicly detailed. Their identities are protected. In many ways, they have become symbols rather than subjects, representing a moment that transcends personal circumstance. Behind closed doors, investigators work. Surveillance footage is reviewed. Dispatch logs are analyzed. Agents involved are interviewed. Procedures are examined against federal standards of engagement. Every decision made in seconds is now evaluated over days and weeks. This is how accountability unfolds, not with headlines but with paperwork. And yet public confidence depends not only on outcomes, but on transparency. And transparency, in cases involving federal force, has historically been difficult to achieve. Statements are measured. Releases are limited. Legal caution governs every word. Portland residents wait. Some fear the findings will be inconclusive. Others believe they will confirm justification. Many simply want clarity, not outrage, not rhetoric, just an honest accounting of what happened and why. Chief Bob Day's earlier call for calm continues to echo. His acknowledgement of national tension is not forgotten. It reflects a broader understanding. Incidents like this do not exist in a vacuum. They are filtered through years of mistrust, reform efforts, and unresolved grievances. This is why the stakes feel so high. A single conclusion from this investigation could influence how future federal operations are perceived, not only in Portland, but nationwide. It could reinforce confidence in oversight mechanisms or deepen skepticism. It could ease tensions or quietly harden divisions. And beyond the immediate case, there is a larger question hovering over the city and the country. How does a democracy balance security with restraint? Federal authority with local autonomy, enforcement with accountability. There are no easy answers, only processes, only principles, only precedents built case by case. As the days pass, the story slowly recedes from breaking news into sustained attention. It becomes a topic of policy discussion rather than urgent alerts. But its impact lingers, etched into the collective memory of a city that has seen too many moments like this before. For Portland, This is not just about what happened on one afternoon, it is about what comes next, whether trust can be rebuilt, whether lines of authority remain clear, whether investigations lead to understanding, not just closure. The gunfire has stopped, the sirens are gone, but the conversation continues. And in that conversation lies the true aftermath, not written in police reports or federal statements, but in how communities and institutions choose to move forward together. This was not just an incident, it was a test, and the final verdict will not be delivered in a single announcement, but over time, in actions, transparency, and the willingness to learn from the silence that followed the shots.